"Hands on the hood now!" the officer shouts, his hand already on his gun. Marcus Johnson remains calm, slowly reaches for his phone and says, "Officer, before you make a mistake, I'd like to make a call." The officer scoffs dismissively, but freezes when he hears Marcus say, "Hello, Commissioner Williams, yes, it's me. I'm being detained by badge number 7842. The day had started like any other for Marcus Johnson, a respected 42-year-old university professor in Boston. Driving to work in his BMW, he noticed the police car lights flashing in his rearview mirror. A routine procedure, he thought. But upon seeing the hostile expression of the young officer approaching, Marcus felt that familiar knot in his stomach. Folks, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And comment below which city you're watching this incredible story of justice from that's about to take a complete turn. What should have been a simple stop for a burnt-out taillight quickly transformed into a tense situation. The officer, Thomas Wells, seemed determined to find something wrong. "Is this car really yours? Seems too expensive for someone like you." The insinuation hung in the air like poison. Marcus knew that look well. It wasn't the first time his presence in a predominantly white neighborhood had raised unjustified suspicion. As the officer rummaged through his glove compartment without permission, Marcus realized he was facing yet another case of what his students called driving while black. The difference was that, this time, he wasn't unprepared. The city's recent police reform program had given Marcus a connection that few citizens possessed: the personal number of Police Commissioner Robert Williams. What Officer Wells didn't know was that Marcus Johnson wasn't just any professor. He had developed the new anti-racial bias training program for the city's police department, work that had put him in direct contact with Boston's top public safety officials. Would Marcus use this connection to turn the tables? And what would be the true cost of challenging a system that frequently protects its own members? Marcus Johnson had built his career on the firm belief in the possibility of change. As a sociology professor at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, he specialized in the study of race relations and institutional reforms. His latest book, Beyond the Badge: Rebuilding Trust Between Communities and Police, had caught the attention of the Mayor and Commissioner Williams, resulting in an invitation to lead a pioneering awareness program in the city's police department. "Your documents seem to be in order, but I smell marijuana coming from this car," Officer Wells lied, his aggressive tone revealing more about his character than about any actual violation. Marcus observed the officer meticulously, noting that his body camera was turned off, a direct violation of the new protocol that he himself had helped implement. "Officer, with all due respect, there is no smell of illegal substances, because there's nothing illegal in this vehicle. I formally request that you turn on your body camera as per departmental regulations," said Marcus, keeping his voice calm and professional despite the growing tension. Officer Wells looked down, noticing his camera was off, and smirked. "Technical issues happen, and now I'll need to search your vehicle completely." Boston had changed significantly in the last decade. The city, known for its complex history of racial tensions, had implemented progressive reforms in its police department after a series of controversial incidents that gained national attention. But as Marcus frequently argued in his lectures, institutional change was only the first step. True transformation needed to happen at the individual level, in the unconscious biases that persisted even after training and new policies. In the academic community, Marcus was respected not just for his rigorous research, but also for his willingness to work directly with institutions that many of his colleagues preferred to merely criticize from a distance. This pragmatism earned him both admirers and critics. Some saw him as an essential bridge builder, while others questioned whether his collaboration with the system was a way of legitimizing it. "Do you know how many university professors I've arrested for drug possession?" Wells provoked, clearly trying to intimidate Marcus. "You intellectuals always think you're above the law." The comment revealed much about the officer's resentment. Thomas Wells, 29, had grown up in South Boston, a traditionally working-class neighborhood. The son of a firefighter and a nurse, Wells joined the police force following a family tradition. His father, though a firefighter, had several friends in the police department, and Wells grew up admiring the badge and all it represented. The problem was that the Boston Wells had idealized in his youth was rapidly disappearing. The city was more diverse, more progressive, and officers like him felt increasingly scrutinized and disrespected. To Wells, men like Marcus represented everything that was wrong with modern America. People who had never really worked, telling police officers how to do their job. "Officer, I understand you're doing your job, but I want to ensure this procedure follows all proper protocols," Marcus insisted, discreetly beginning to record the interaction on his own phone. He noticed the tension in Wells's shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands, signs of a man on edge, potentially dangerous. A few blocks away at the Harborview restaurant, Commissioner Robert Williams was participating in a breakfast with community leaders to discuss the very implementation of the program developed by Marcus. Williams, a 30-year veteran of the force, had risen through the ranks on merit, but also through his remarkable ability to navigate the complex departmental politics. Today, as Boston's first black commissioner, he carried the weight of representing both the police institution and the African-American community, a delicate balance that required constant vigilance. "Step out of the car, sir," Wells ordered, his tone shifting from provocative to authoritarian. The situation was escalating quickly, exactly as Marcus feared. "On what grounds, officer?" Marcus asked calmly, knowing his rights perfectly. "I haven't consented to a search of my vehicle, and you haven't presented legitimate probable cause." Officer Wells's face reddened. "I'm tired of your attitude. Get out of the car now, or I'll remove you by force for obstructing justice." It was at this moment that Marcus made the decision that would change everything. With deliberately slow movements, keeping his hands visible, he reached for his phone. "Officer, before we proceed, I'd like to make a call." Without waiting for a response, Marcus dialed the number. The officer stepped forward, clearly intending to prevent the call, when Marcus spoke. "Commissioner Williams? Good morning. This is Marcus Johnson. I apologize for bothering you so early, but I'm in a situation that requires your immediate attention." Wells froze, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "I'm being detained on Commonwealth Avenue by an officer who refuses to identify the reason for the stop, has turned off his body camera, and is threatening to arrest me without probable cause. The badge number is 7842, Officer Thomas Wells." Marcus's voice remained calm, professional, with no traces of emotional accusation. On the other end of the line, Commissioner Williams felt the familiar weight of this situation. It wasn't the first time a respectable citizen like Marcus faced police harassment, but it was rare for the victim to have direct access to department leadership. As commissioner, he was committed to reform, but also knew he needed to support his officers when they acted correctly. This didn't seem to be the case. "Please pass the phone to Officer Wells," Marcus heard the commissioner say, and extended the device to the clearly disturbed officer. "Commissioner, Wells began, but was interrupted. For the next 2 minutes he just listened, occasionally murmuring, "Yes, sir," and "Understood, sir." His face went from red to pale. While the conversation was happening, Marcus observed the transformation in the officer's behavior. The power Wells had felt minutes before was rapidly evaporating. This was the reality that Marcus tried to demonstrate in his lectures, that institutional power didn't exist in a vacuum, but within hierarchies and accountability systems that, when functioning properly, could restrict abuses. Wells returned the phone to Marcus, his expression completely altered. "The commissioner would like to speak with you again," he said, his voice now strangely formal. "Marcus, I deeply apologize for this situation," said Williams. "Officer Wells will receive immediate guidance. Please continue on your way, and I'd like to meet with you later today to discuss this incident in detail. It directly affects the work we're doing together." After hanging up, Marcus faced Officer Wells, who now seemed smaller, less threatening. "Officer, I have no desire to complicate your career. What I seek is simply mutual respect and fair application of the law." "You may proceed on your way, sir," Wells responded coldly, handing back the documents. As Marcus started his car, he realized that this incident, as disturbing as it was exactly the kind of situation his training program intended to address. As an academic, he could transform this personal experience into a case study for future instruction. As a black man in America, he knew that his connection to the commissioner was a rare privilege that most citizens in his situation didn't possess. What Wells didn't know was that the incident had been completely recorded on Marcus's phone, not just audio, but discrete video captured by the phone strategically positioned on the dashboard mount. And Marcus had plans for this recording. At the Boston Police Department, Commissioner Williams' phone wouldn't stop ringing. Marcus's call had interrupted a crucial meeting about the departmental budget. But Williams immediately recognized the importance of the intervention. Thomas Wells wasn't a rookie. He had 6 years of service and multiple complaints for aggressive conduct, especially with minorities. Until now, he had escaped serious consequences thanks to an impressive arrest record and family connections within the department. The commissioner knew this case could be the catalyst for the change he had been trying to implement. 2 hours after the incident, Marcus sat in his office at the university, still shaken by the morning's events. His first class had gone well despite his distraction. Years of teaching had given him the ability to compartmentalize. But now, alone with his thoughts, the full weight of what had transpired settled on his shoulders. His phone buzzed with a text message from Commissioner Williams. "My office, 4 p.m. today. We need to discuss not just your incident, but the broader implications. Bringing the Deputy Commissioner and legal counsel." Marcus stared at the message, contemplating his next move. The recording he'd made was more damning than Officer Wells could possibly imagine. Every disparaging comment, every procedural violation, every thinly veiled threat, all captured in high definition. But Marcus wasn't interested in simply punishing one officer. His goal had always been systemic change. A knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. It was Dr. Eliza Chen, his department chair and longtime mentor. "I heard something happened this morning," she said, closing the door behind her. "Campus gossip travels fast. Are you okay?" Marcus offered a tired smile. "Just another day in America." Eliza, a Chinese-American woman in her 60s who had fought her own battles against discrimination in academia, knew better than to offer empty platitudes. "What are you going to do about it?" "That's the million-dollar question," Marcus replied, turning his computer screen to show her the video. "I have evidence that could end Officer Wells's career, but will removing one officer change the system?" As Eliza watched the footage, her expression darkened. "This is textbook harassment, but I understand your dilemma." At the same time, across town at the Boston Police Department headquarters, Officer Thomas Wells sat rigidly in a hard plastic chair outside the Internal Affairs office. After the call with Commissioner Williams, his sergeant had ordered him back to the station immediately. His gun and badge had been temporarily placed in administrative hold, standard procedure for officers under investigation. "Wells," a stern voice called. Captain Rodriguez, head of Internal Affairs, stood in the doorway. "We're ready for you." Inside the sparse interview room, Wells faced not only Captain Rodriguez, but also Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, the department's newly appointed compliance officer, another initiative from the reform program Marcus had helped design. "Do you understand why you're here?" Rodriguez asked, his voice neutral but firm. "Yes, sir, there was a complaint about my stop this morning." "Not just a complaint," Hayes interjected, sliding a tablet across the table. "We've reviewed your cruiser's dashcam footage. It doesn't show the interaction since you conducted it outside camera range, but it does show that the vehicle you stopped had functioning taillights. Care to explain why you stated otherwise in your initial radio call?" Wells felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He hadn't considered the dashcam would contradict his stated reason for the stop. "I must have been mistaken about which light was out," he stammered. Rodriguez leaned forward. "Officer Wells, this department is under intense scrutiny. The consent decree requires us to document and justify every stop involving minorities. Your body camera was off for 9 minutes during this encounter. That alone is grounds for suspension." "Sir, I can explain—" "Save it," Rodriguez cut him off. "The man you stopped wasn't just any civilian. He's a key partner in our reform initiatives and has the commissioner's ear. But that's not even the point. The point is that every citizen deserves the same respect and procedural fairness you failed to provide today." Wells felt his career crumbling around him. 6 years on the force, following in his family's footsteps, all potentially destroyed by one traffic stop. What would his father say? The old man had warned him repeatedly about the new politics in the department, about how officers couldn't do their jobs anymore without worrying about optics and feelings. "What happens now?" Wells asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Hayes and Rodriguez exchanged glances. "That largely depends on Dr. Johnson," Hayes replied. "And on whether you're willing to acknowledge that the problem today wasn't politics or optics, but your own conduct." As Marcus prepared for his meeting at police headquarters, another drama was unfolding at the Boston Globe offices downtown. Jennifer Reyes, an investigative reporter who had been covering police reform for the past 3 years, received an anonymous email containing a compilation of body camera footage showing Officer Thomas Wells's previous encounters with minority citizens. "This can't be legal," she muttered to her editor, Michael Steiner, as they reviewed the footage. "Whoever leaked this is risking a lot." "The question is, do we run with it?" Steiner replied, his journalistic instincts warring with legal concerns. "If these clips were obtained illegally, but if they show a pattern of behavior the public should know about," Jennifer countered. What neither knew was that the leak had come from Officer Darius Washington, a young black officer who had partnered with Wells during his first year on the force. Washington had witnessed Wells' behavior firsthand and had filed confidential reports that went nowhere. When he heard about the incident with Marcus Johnson, he decided more drastic measures were needed. Meanwhile, at City Hall, Mayor Eleanor Hayes was facing a different crisis. The police union president, Frank Mahoney, sat across from her, his face flushed with anger. "This witch hunt against Officer Wells is exactly why morale is at an all-time low," Mahoney insisted. "One complaint from some professor with connections, and suddenly a decorated officer is treated like a criminal." Mayor Hayes, a pragmatic politician in her second term, measured her response carefully. "Frank, you know I've always supported our officers, but this situation is complicated by the fact that Dr. Johnson is central to the consent decree implementation. If his allegations are substantiated—" "Allegations!" Mahoney interrupted. "We have officers risking their lives every day, while academics and politicians second-guess every move they make. Wells has an exemplary record." What Mahoney didn't mention was that the union had successfully negotiated to keep civilian complaints out of officers' official records unless they resulted in formal disciplinary action, a policy that had effectively concealed 17 previous complaints against Wells. "The commissioner has assured me this will be handled fairly," the mayor said firmly, "but I won't interfere with the process, Frank. Those days are over." Back at the university, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Shanice Wells, Officer Thomas Wells's younger sister, and coincidentally a graduate student in Marcus's department, though not in any of his classes. "Dr. Johnson," she said, standing awkwardly in his doorway. "I don't know if you remember me." "Ms. Wells, of course." "From the criminal justice program, right?" Marcus invited her in, immediately noticing her red-rimmed eyes. "My brother called me," she said without preamble. "He told me what happened this morning. I wanted you to know that Tommy he wasn't always—" She struggled to find the words. Marcus observed her silently. This was the human cost of systemic issues. Families torn between loyalty and justice. Individuals carrying the weight of institutional failures. "Your brother and I had an unfortunate encounter," Marcus said carefully. "But I'm more concerned with addressing the underlying issues than punishing any individual officer." Shanice looked up, surprised. "That's not what he thinks. He's convinced his career is over, that you're out to make an example of him." "And what do you think?" Marcus asked gently. She paused, conflict evident in her expression. "I think my brother has some beliefs that I don't share. Our father was old-school law enforcement. Tommy idolized him, adopted all his perspectives. I chose a different path, which is why you're studying criminal justice reform," Marcus noted. "Yes, actually, I've read your work. That's why I came. I thought maybe this could somehow become something constructive rather than just punitive." As she spoke, an idea began forming in Marcus's mind, a potentially revolutionary approach to this situation that might satisfy all parties while still advancing the cause of reform. But it would require cooperation from some unlikely allies. "Ms. Wells, I have a meeting with Commissioner Williams in an hour. Would you be willing to share some insights about your brother that might help me propose a different kind of resolution?" The Boston Police Department headquarters stood as a monument to authority, a massive concrete structure designed to project strength and permanence. As Marcus walked through the metal detectors in the lobby, he felt the weight of history pressing down on him. How many black men had entered this building in handcuffs rather than as invited guests? Commissioner Williams' office on the top floor offered a stark contrast to the utilitarian spaces below. With floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and walls adorned with photographs of the commissioner with various dignitaries, it was clearly designed to impress. "Marcus," Williams greeted him with a firm handshake, "thank you for coming. I believe you know Deputy Commissioner Rivera and our Chief Legal Counsel, Ms. Abernathy." The meeting began with formal apologies and a detailed account of the immediate actions taken: Officer Wells' temporary reassignment to desk duty pending investigation, a review of his prior conduct, and reinforcement of body camera protocols. While these steps are necessary, Williams concluded, they're also familiar. We've been here before with other officers. What I'm more interested in is your perspective on how we break this cycle. Marcus leaned forward. Before I share that, I'd like to know what typically happens in cases like this, statistically speaking. The three officials exchanged glances before Ms. Abernathy spoke. Typically, the officer receives a suspension without pay, ranging from 3 days to 2 weeks. They complete additional training and return to duty, often with a formal reprimand in their file. And the recidivism rate, Marcus pressed. Higher than we'd like to admit, Rivera acknowledged. About 60% of officers with one substantiated complaint will receive another within 18 months. So the current approach isn't working, Marcus stated. What if we tried something completely different? He outlined the proposal he had been contemplating since his conversation with Shanice Wells, a restorative justice approach rather than a punitive one. Officer Wells would participate in an intensive mentorship program, working directly with Marcus and a team of community leaders to develop a deeper understanding of the communities he policed. Instead of temporarily removing him from duty, embed him in the communities he's shown bias against, Marcus explained. Not as an officer initially, but as a learner. Have him work in community centers, attend neighborhood meetings, hear directly from citizens about their experiences with law enforcement. Williams looked skeptical. And you'd be willing to work with him after how he treated you? This isn't about me and Officer Wells, Marcus replied. It's about creating a model for meaningful change. If we can transform one officer's perspective through deep community engagement rather than mandatory sensitivity training videos, we might develop an approach that works more broadly. As the discussion continued, the door opened and an aide whispered urgently in Commissioner Williams' ear. His expression darkened immediately. "We have a situation," Williams announced. "The Boston Globe has received leaked body camera footage showing Officer Wells engaged in questionable stops of minority citizens. They're planning to run the story tomorrow." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This development changed everything. A public scandal would make Marcus's restorative approach politically untenable. The department would be forced to take more dramatic action against Wells to demonstrate accountability. "Who leaked it?" Rivera demanded. "Unknown," Williams replied, "but that's not our biggest problem. The footage apparently shows at least 3 incidents where Wells disabled his camera mid-interaction, only to reactivate it later. In the interim, according to witnesses quoted in the article, verbal abuse and threats occurred." Marcus processed this information. The Officer Wells who had stopped him wasn't having an isolated bad day. He was exhibiting a pattern of behavior. This complicated Marcus's proposal significantly. "Commissioner," Marcus said finally, "this changes things, but it doesn't invalidate the approach. In fact, it makes it more necessary. If Officer Wells has a history of these behaviors, removing him from the force merely pushes the problem elsewhere. He'd likely join another department, carrying these biases with him. The public will demand his termination," Abernathy argued, "and the union will fight us every step of the way, regardless of which direction we take." "Then let's get ahead of this," Marcus urged. "Contact the Globe, tell them you've already been addressing this specific case and are implementing a groundbreaking approach to officer rehabilitation that goes beyond typical disciplinary measures. Frame it as the department taking innovative steps toward meaningful reform rather than just reactive punishment." Williams stared out the window at the city below. "It's risky, very risky." "Reform always is," Marcus replied. "But consider the alternative. Another cycle of outrage, punishment, and eventual return to the status quo. Nothing changes." The commissioner turned back to face them, his decision evident in his expression. "Make the call to the Globe. And, Officer Wells, bring him up here. Now." When Officer Thomas Wells entered the commissioner's office 20 minutes later, he was visibly shocked to find Marcus Johnson seated at the conference table. His eyes darted between the professor and his superiors, a mix of fear and resentment evident in his rigid posture. "Take a seat, Officer Wells," Commissioner Williams instructed, his tone neither friendly nor hostile, simply authoritative. Wells sat as far from Marcus as the table allowed, avoiding eye contact. "Officer," "We have a situation," Williams began, explaining the impending Boston Globe story without revealing the source of the leak. "These allegations, combined with this morning's incident with Dr. Johnson, paint a concerning picture of your conduct." Wells's face flushed. "Sir, with all due respect, these are isolated incidents being taken out of context. In today's environment, officers have split seconds to make decisions that—" "Save it," Deputy Commissioner Rivera interrupted. "Your body camera was deliberately turned off multiple times. That's not split-second decision-making. That's premeditation." Marcus observed Wells carefully. The officer's defensive posture, the tightening of his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands, all indicated a man who felt cornered. In Marcus's experience, this was the most dangerous and least productive state for initiating change. "Officer Wells," Marcus said, speaking directly to him for the first time since their roadside encounter, "I'm not here to bury you." Wells finally met his gaze, suspicion evident. "Then why are you here, Professor?" "Because I believe in the possibility of transformation, not just of individuals, but of systems. And sometimes, changing the system begins with a single relationship." Marcus outlined his proposal: the intensive community engagement program, the mentorship, the opportunity to become part of the solution rather than another casualty of the disciplinary process. As he spoke, he watched Wells's expression shift from skepticism to cautious curiosity. "This isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card," Commissioner Williams clarified. "You'll be under intense scrutiny. Any further incidents, any failure to fully engage with the program, and termination will be immediate and permanent." "And if I refuse?" Wells asked. "Then we proceed with standard disciplinary measures," Williams replied. "Likely termination, given the severity and pattern of misconduct. The Boston Globe runs their story, and you become another statistic in the ongoing narrative of police misconduct. Your choice." The room fell silent as Wells considered his options. After what seemed like an eternity, he spoke. "Why would you do this?" he asked Marcus. "After how I treated you? There's got to be an angle." The question revealed volumes about Wells's worldview, his inherent distrust, his inability to conceive of actions not motivated by personal gain or vengeance. This was precisely the mindset Marcus hoped to change. "Because punishment isn't always the path to justice," Marcus answered. "Sometimes justice requires something much harder, genuine understanding and the willingness to evolve." Before Wells could respond, the door opened, and legal counsel Abernathy returned from her call with the Boston Globe's editor. "They've agreed to hold the story for 48 hours, she announced. "They want an exclusive on whatever alternative approach we're developing. And they want interviews with all primary participants." "Including Officer Wells?" Williams asked. "Especially Officer Wells." Wells paled visibly. "You want me to go public? Admit wrongdoing on record?" "We want you to demonstrate authentic accountability," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference." As the implications sank in, Wells's internal struggle played out across his face. His career, his identity, his self-image, all hung in the balance. Finally, he looked directly at Marcus. "You've had run-ins with police before, haven't you? This isn't just professional for you." Marcus hadn't expected such perception from the officer. "Yes, several. The first when I was 12, walking home from school in a good neighborhood. The officer thought I must have stolen my own backpack." Something shifted in Wells's expression, not quite empathy, but perhaps the first crack in his defensive wall. This program, how would it actually work? For the next hour, they hammered out the details of what would become the Community Immersion and Reconciliation Program, a pilot initiative that, if successful with Officer Wells, could be expanded to other officers with similar issues. By the meeting's end, an unprecedented agreement had been reached. As they prepared to leave, Wells hesitated, then extended his hand to Marcus. "I'm not promising miracles, Professor." Marcus accepted the handshake. "Neither am I, Officer. Just a commitment to try something different." The Boston Globe's headline read, "Innovative Approach. BPD Officer Joins Community Immersion Program After Misconduct Allegations." The article detailed the new initiative, featuring quotes from Commissioner Williams, Marcus, and, most surprisingly to readers, Officer Wells himself. "I recognize that my actions have damaged trust between the police and the communities we serve," Wells was quoted saying. "This program offers an opportunity to rebuild that trust, beginning with my own understanding and behavior. The public reaction was predictably mixed. Police reform advocates cautiously praised the approach while expressing skepticism about its effectiveness. The police union issued a terse statement supporting Officer Wells while condemning the rush to judgment about his conduct. On social media, opinions ranged from calls for Wells's immediate firing to accusations that the department was being too soft. 4 days after the article, the Community Immersion and Reconciliation Program officially began. Wells, dressed in civilian clothes rather than his uniform, met Marcus at the Roxbury Community Center, a hub of activity in one of Boston's historically black neighborhoods. "First rule," Marcus said as they walked into the building, "you're not here as a police officer. You're here as Thomas Wells, community member and listener. That's going to be difficult," Wells admitted, already uncomfortable without the authority his uniform typically provided. "Growth usually is," Marcus replied. Inside, they were met by Darlene Washington, the center's director and, though Wells didn't know it, Officer Darius Washington's mother. Marcus had specifically selected her as the first community partner for the program, knowing her deep understanding of both community concerns and law enforcement perspectives. "Mr. Wells," she greeted him with professional courtesy but notable reserve. "Welcome to RCC. Today you'll be observing our youth program and helping prepare for tonight's community dinner." Wells looked uncertainly at the bustling activity around him. Teenagers playing basketball, elderly residents gathered for a health workshop, young mothers with children in the daycare area. This was a side of Roxbury he had never experienced during his patrols. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" he asked. "First, just watch, then help, then learn," Darlene said simply. For the next 6 hours, Wells moved through the community center like a ghost, present but disconnected, observing but not participating. He watched the easy camaraderie between community members, the respect shown to elders, the structured activities keeping teens engaged after school. It was a stark contrast to his usual interactions in the neighborhood, which typically involved responding to calls about disturbances or crimes. By late afternoon, when he was tasked with helping set up tables for the community dinner, Wells found himself working alongside 16-year-old Jamal, a lanky basketball player with a quick wit. "You're new here," Jamal observed as they carried folding tables across the gym. "Yeah," Wells replied awkwardly. "Just volunteering." "Cool. We need more help around here since they cut the city funding again." Wells looked up in surprise. "They cut funding for this place? Why? It seems important." Jamal shrugged. "Police department got a budget increase, though. Priorities, I guess." The casual comment hit Wells like a slap. He recalled celebrating that budget increase with his colleagues just months earlier. New equipment, overtime opportunities, upgraded facilities. Later, as community members filtered in for dinner, Wells found himself serving food alongside Marcus. The casual conversations flowing around him, about local schools, job opportunities, healthcare challenges, painted a picture of community life he'd never considered. "Officer Wells," a small voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find a young girl, perhaps 9 years old, looking up at him with wide eyes. "How did you—" he began, startled that she had recognized him without his uniform. "My big brother showed me your picture from the newspaper," she explained. "He said you're learning to be a better police officer." Wells felt a flush of embarrassment mixed with something else, shame perhaps, or perhaps the first stirrings of something like humility. "I'm trying," he said finally. "Good," she replied matter-of-factly, "because my brother wants to be a police officer too someday, but my mom is scared for him." As she walked away, Wells caught Marcus watching the interaction. "This isn't going to work if you're just observing from a distance," Marcus said quietly. "Real change requires real engagement." "I know," Wells admitted. "I'm just not sure they want me engaged. Not after what that Globe article revealed." "They don't," Marcus confirmed. "That's precisely why it matters that you try anyway." 3 weeks into the program, Thomas Wells was a changed man, at least outwardly. He had progressed from reluctant observer to active participant in community center activities. He coached basketball twice weekly, helped seniors with technology questions during computer literacy classes, and had become a familiar face at community events. The initial wariness from residents had not entirely disappeared, but interactions had become noticeably less strained. Marcus observed these developments with cautious optimism. In their daily debriefing sessions, Wells demonstrated growing awareness of community perspectives, though he still occasionally lapsed into defensive justifications of police tactics. It's not that simple, Wells argued during one particularly heated discussion about stop-and-frisk policies. When you're patrolling high-crime areas, you have to make quick judgments based on experience, and those quick judgments just happen to disproportionately target young Black and Latino men, Marcus challenged. The statistics can be manipulated and misinterpreted, Marcus finished. Those high-crime areas become high crime in the statistics precisely because they're over-policed, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. These philosophical clashes continued, but Marcus noted that Wells had begun asking more questions and making fewer declarations, a subtle but significant shift. The real test came unexpectedly on a Tuesday evening. Marcus and Wells had just finished a community forum on police-community relations, their first public event together, when Marcus's phone rang. It was Shanice Wells, Thomas's sister. "Dr. Johnson." Her voice was tight with tension. "Have you seen the news? There was an incident at Boston North High School. A school resource officer arrested a Black student for disorderly conduct after the student refused to surrender his cell phone. It's all over social media." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Boston North was in Wells's former patrol area, and the school resource officer was Mike Donovan, Wells's former partner and close friend. "Thomas is with me," Marcus said. "We'll look into it." When Marcus showed Wells the viral video, showing Officer Donovan aggressively handcuffing a Black teenager while white students recording the incident remained untouched, he watched the officer's reaction carefully. Wells's face remained impressively neutral as he watched, but his clenched fists betrayed his internal struggle. "Mike followed protocol," he said finally. "The kid was being disruptive and refused lawful commands." Marcus felt a wave of disappointment. After weeks of progress, Wells was defaulting to the thin blue line. "Is that really what you see in this video?" "What do you want me to say?" Wells demanded, suddenly angry. "That Mike should let kids disrespect his authority? That maintaining classroom order isn't part of his job?" "I want you to apply the perspective you've been developing these past weeks," Marcus said calmly. "Look beyond protocol to the human dynamics. A white officer physically dominating a Black child over a cell phone, with different standards visibly applied to white students in the same situation." Wells paced the room, conflict evident in every movement. "You don't understand. Mike's one of the good ones. We came through the academy together. He's got my back, always has." And there it was, the central tension of police reform, the powerful bonds between officers, the instinct to defend one's own, the inability to see misconduct when it came from one of the good ones. "Thomas," Marcus said carefully, "no one's asking you to betray your friend. But growth requires honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then." The ringing of Wells's phone interrupted them. The screen showed Mike D calling. Wells stared at it, then at Marcus. "Take it," Marcus said, "but remember everything you've learned." Wells stepped outside for the call. Through the window, Marcus could see the officer's agitated gesturing, the tension in his shoulders. After 5 minutes, Wells returned, his expression troubled. "Mike wants me to make a public statement supporting his actions," he said quietly. "Says the brass is hanging him out to dry, that the media is making him look racist when he was just doing his job." "And what did you tell him?" Wells took a deep breath. "I told him I needed to review the full incident report first." It wasn't a rejection of his friend's request, but it wasn't the automatic support that would have come 3 weeks earlier. It was a small step, but significant. "There's going to be a community meeting at Boston North tomorrow night," Marcus said. "Parents, students, administration, and police representatives discussing the incident and broader issues of school discipline. I think we should attend." "As what? I'm not in uniform anymore, and you don't have kids at the school." "As what we are, people working on a new approach to police-community relations. This incident is exactly what our program was created to address." Wells was silent for a long moment. "If I go to that meeting and don't fully back Mike, I'm crossing a line I can never uncross. You understand that, right?" "I do," Marcus acknowledged. "But sometimes the most important lines are the ones we need to redraw entirely." The gymnasium of Boston North High School was packed beyond capacity. Parents, students, teachers, administrators, and community members filled every available seat, with dozens more standing along the walls. At the front, a panel table had been set up with microphones for school officials, police representatives, and community leaders. Marcus and Wells arrived 20 minutes early, yet still had to squeeze their way through the crowd to find standing room at the back. The tension in the air was palpable. Angry whispers, tearful conversations, and occasional outbursts of frustration, creating a volatile atmosphere. "I shouldn't be here," Wells muttered, acutely aware of the hostile glances thrown his way by those who recognized him from the newspaper coverage. "This is exactly where you need to be," Marcus countered, witnessing community pain firsthand, not just reading about it in reports. The meeting began with the principal's formal statement about the incident, followed by the district superintendent announcing that the student had been cleared of all charges. The police department's representative, a public relations officer who'd never worked patrol a day in his life, offered carefully crafted remarks about reviewing procedures and ongoing training initiatives. When community members were invited to speak, raw emotion filled the room. The mother of the arrested student approached the microphone, her voice shaking. "My son is 16 years old. He's never been in trouble. He's in AP classes with a 3.8 GPA. But none of that mattered once Officer Donovan decided he was a problem. Now my boy is afraid to go back to school. He wakes up with nightmares about being handcuffed in front of his classmates." More speakers followed, students describing the fear they now felt around the school resource officer. Teachers expressing concern about the criminalization of normal teenage behavior. Community advocates contextualizing this incident within broader patterns of disciplinary disparities. Throughout it all, Wells stood silently, his law enforcement training evident in his stoic expression. But Marcus, watching closely, could see the impact each testimony was having, the slight wince, the momentary closing of eyes, the deep breaths. Then, unexpectedly, Mike Donovan himself entered the gymnasium. A ripple of tension swept through the crowd as the officer in full uniform made his way to the front row, accompanied by several other officers, a show of solidarity that came across more as intimidation. Donovan spotted Wells in the back and shot him a look that communicated a clear expectation of support. Wells nodded almost imperceptibly in acknowledgement, his body language suddenly tense. The meeting continued for another hour, with proposals for policy changes, demands for Donovan's removal from the school, and heartfelt pleas for mutual understanding. As the moderator began wrapping up, Donovan stood and approached a microphone. "I'd like to say something," he announced, his tone confrontational rather than conciliatory. The moderator hesitated, but allowed it. "I've served this community faithfully for 8 years," Donovan began. "Every day I put my life on the line to keep these halls safe. The incident in question involved a student who repeatedly violated school policy and then became belligerent when asked to comply. I followed my training and department protocol. The video circulating online shows only a fraction of what occurred." As murmurs of disagreement spread through the crowd, Donovan raised his voice. "I'm not here to apologize for doing my job. And I know my brothers and sisters in blue stand with me on this." His eyes found Wells again. "In fact, my former partner, Officer Wells, has been through similar situations with me countless times. He knows exactly the challenges we face." It was a direct challenge, an attempt to publicly force Wells to take sides. The room fell silent as hundreds of eyes turned toward the back of the gymnasium where Wells stood. Marcus felt the pivotal moment unfolding. He said nothing, did nothing. This had to be Wells's decision alone. Wells took a deep breath and stepped forward, making his way through the crowd to a microphone. The silence was deafening as he adjusted it to his height. "My name is Thomas Wells. Until recently I patrolled this neighborhood alongside Officer Donovan." He paused, looking at his former partner. "Mike is right about one thing. I've been in similar situations with him many times." Donovan smiled slightly, clearly expecting vindication. "But what Mike doesn't know," Wells continued, his voice gaining strength, "is that for the past month, I've been learning how those similar situations look and feel from the other side." The smile vanished from Donovan's face. "I watched the video of what happened in that classroom, and 3 months ago, I would have defended those actions without hesitation. I would have used the same words Mike just did, about protocol and compliance and officer safety." Wells looked around the gymnasium, making eye contact with community members. "But I've been listening, really listening, to the experiences of the people we serve. And I've come to understand that following protocol isn't enough if the protocols themselves are flawed." Being legally justified isn't enough if our actions traumatize the very communities we're meant to protect. 1 year later, the Boston Police Department's Community Immersion and Reconciliation program had expanded significantly. What began as an experimental alternative to disciplinary action for a single officer had evolved into a proactive initiative embraced by the department's leadership. 28 officers had now completed the program, and preliminary data showed meaningful improvements in community satisfaction and reduced complaints in the participating officers' patrol areas. Thomas Wells, no longer just a participant, had become one of the program's mentors. His transformation had not been without cost. Many of his former colleagues still viewed him as a traitor to the badge, and Mike Donovan hadn't spoken to him since that night at Boston North High School. But Wells had found a new sense of purpose that transcended the brotherhood he'd once valued above all else. Marcus Johnson had received national recognition for the program's innovative approach, including a substantial federal grant to expand the model to other cities. His research on police reform now included compelling case studies from Boston's experience, and departments from across the country were sending representatives to observe the program firsthand. The most significant changes, however, were the quiet ones that statistics couldn't capture. At a community basketball tournament hosted by the Roxbury Community Center, Officer Wells coached a team that included Jamal, the teenager he'd met on his first day at the center. After their team won the championship game, Jamal's mother, who once crossed the street to avoid police officers, actually thanked Wells for his mentorship of her son. At Boston North High School, a new approach to school safety had been implemented. Rather than a single armed officer patrolling the halls, a team of safety coordinators, including both police officers and civilian youth development specialists, worked together to create a supportive environment. The student who had been handcuffed was now part of a youth advisory council that provided input on school policies. Commissioner Williams, nearing retirement, cited the Community Immersion and Reconciliation program as one of his proudest accomplishments. "We didn't just discipline officers who made mistakes," he told the Boston Globe in an extended interview. "We created a pathway for genuine transformation. That's the difference between performative reform and meaningful change." For Marcus, the program's success was personally validating but also bittersweet. The progress in Boston was real, but he knew similar scenarios were playing out in cities across America, where black citizens didn't have direct lines to police commissioners. The work was far from over. On the anniversary of their roadside encounter, Marcus and Wells met for coffee at a cafe halfway between the university and police headquarters. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if I hadn't made that call?" Marcus asked. Wells considered the question carefully. "Every day," he finally replied, "but I also think about all the encounters that happened before yours, when I was the same officer, but the citizen didn't have your connections." Marcus nodded. "That's why we keep doing the work. One officer at a time," Wells agreed. "One community at a time. What you've just witnessed is more than just a story. It's a reflection of the complex reality many face and the potential for transformation when we approach deep-seated problems with innovation rather than just punishment." The journey of Officer Wells from a defensive, biased officer to someone capable of genuine growth reminds us that real change is possible, but it requires honest confrontation with uncomfortable truths. The wisdom of Marcus Johnson shows us that sometimes justice looks different than we expect, that punishment alone doesn't heal communities or transform individuals. If this story resonated with you, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect on where similar approaches might work in your own community. The problems we face around policing, race, and community trust are complex, but they're not unsolvable if we're willing to try new approaches. I've put tremendous effort into crafting this story to be both entertaining and thought-provoking. If you've stayed with me until this point, please comment, "I watched until the end," so I know this longer format is working for my audience. Your feedback helps me create content that truly connects with you. Every like and subscription helps this channel grow and allows these important conversations to reach more people. The algorithm favors engagement, so your comments and shares make a genuine difference in spreading these stories to those who might benefit from them. Before you go, check out the video appearing on your screen now, where I explore another powerful story of accountability and transformation in unexpected circumstances. I think you'll find many parallels to what you've just watched, with even more surprising twists. Remember, storytelling has always been one of humanity's most powerful tools for creating empathy and understanding. By sharing these narratives, we create opportunities for perspective-taking that can bridge divides in ways that debates and arguments never could. Thank you for being part of this community that values nuanced exploration of complex issues. Together, we can move beyond the simplistic narratives that divide us and find the common humanity that connects all our stories. If you watched until the end, comment below and let me know what city you're watching from. I love knowing that these stories are reaching people from all walks of life and all corners of the world.